Welcome to the Starting Over podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Today's show is going to probably be broken up into three parts. Part one, I got a donation, so we're going to talk about my donation and a team that I played and some nice tech research I did on that. Then we're going to go into a 30-point meta and look at that real briefly. And then finally, we're going to sort of retouch on the objects and go into some things that I noticed with the objects and how, realistically speaking, certain issues that have come up, which I think players need to be made aware of, and some of the balancing features I think that are built into the objects, but also some of the elements that are still a little bit OP. So we're just going to go into those three elements. I know it's a little bit scattered. I'm thinking about next week to do something like what's inside your head type thing, but that all depends. It all depends on a bunch of different factors. So let's get started. I was given a donation to play a Marvel Knights team at an event here locally by one of my local players. And so I played a Marvel Knights team. I played the Rocket Launcher Punisher, well, the Shifting Focus Punisher, primarily the Rocket Launcher. I played the Fast Forces Punisher and Fast Forces Iron Fist. I was able to borrow a Ghost Rider. I played him at 100 points. I played Night Nurse. I played the Man Without Fear LE. That's the Black Panther one. Sword. And the What If Fast Forces Daredevil. Now, some of you might notice it's like, that's not a bad team. There's a lot of elements in there that are missing, but it's not a bad team. I primarily just rank it B minus in terms of competitive worthy. Now, note, I was at an event, and this is the main reason the donation came up, was this event was something that I really wasn't looking forward to, while at the same time I didn't mind playing. We were playing for the Merc Jet, and I really just didn't care about the Merc Jet. There was other people in my venue that did care about the Merc Jet, so I was just like, yeah, whatever. So I was somewhat just given a bet, like play something else. Now, my tactic in approaching Heroes from Hire, the Marvel Knights, was primarily just sit back, let my opponent come to me. Now, normally I don't try to do that too often, but the understanding is without TK and mass deployment, there is very little incentive when you have decent ranges to excessively move out past turn one. And that's something that people need to remember in their local tournaments is, balancing out the desire to have this honorable war, quote unquote, and the reality that you want to win, or you're at least playing to win. And that's something I was doing. I was still playing to win. I wasn't like just forfeiting matches and be like, yep, let's just go sit here and be crazy and roll dice. Haha, I really wasn't doing that. So you would think like this team is completely, gimped. I only have one prob. I don't have any stat modification or whatever. But being able to have maps where my opponents picked, which had higher levels of elevation, it allowed me to, get some good shots here and there on certain figures. And that part I did like. Now, unfortunately, there were some key elements where I noticed, like, okay, not having any power negation really left me open against characters that had evasion. And so there were several times where clearly I would have hit where my opponent was able to super senses out because I did not have precision strike, or I didn't have or shape change out too. I didn't have battle fury. I didn't have outwit. And so that was a huge deal as well. So, anyway, overall, I have to say from a tournament experience, it wasn't bad. I think from a design perspective, when you're picking keywords, definitely in a keyword-based environment, you want to make sure that you have if your team relies on map, you need to make sure that you have a significant amount of figures, because pretty much everybody else's team is going to have theme team bonus as well, and they can stack the map selection in their favor. Also, make sure that you have some level of synergy when you pick up the keyword. I could have easily gone as Guardian and done a bit better, but even then, as Guardian didn't have some key phrases and terms and powers that I needed. Looking back at the event, I would say if you were going into it and you were looking to do reasonably well, I would have looked for keywords that were a little bit heavier on the support side. X-Men is one, JSA is another, Justice League is one, Avengers, we have a crap ton of Avengers. You can get everything you need from an Avenger. So I know those are things right now that everybody's going to, because a la, Jakeem and all that other jank. But when we really take a step back and look at it, those are some keywords that allow you to have all the utility that you need for economical prices. All right, so let's shift into the second phase of the show, and let's talk about that 30-point meta. Now, the 30-point meta right now, I'm going to sort of break it down. Is we're going to look at figures between 5 points and 30 points. Now, I know some of you would say, like, hey, Dark Logos, some of the objects are cheaper than 5 points, and I'm fully aware of that. But right now, I just want to primarily look at 5 points to 30 points. Now, having previously recorded this late at night and stayed up late to do it, to only delete what I recorded because I didn't think it was good, I'm going to sort of re-examine some things and some thought processes that I had when I first recorded, and sort of rearrange them now. Instead of just picking out figures, I'm just going to set out categories. Now, in your 5 points to 30 points, you have 3 core categories, I feel. Your first core category that everybody looks at to is support. Your second core category, which everybody will usually goes to, is utility. Now, please note I'm separating support versus utility. Utilities are usually very specialized versus support, where I would just primarily look at it as your generic, like, here's my prob, here's my perplex type guys. Then I would also say in your third and last category is going to be your attackers. Now, these attackers are, in my opinion, they're not the best attackers. Like, you can't just run 20 of them and think you're going to win a tournament. But their value in terms of their damage output and their ability to score more than their points is there. Now, I'm going to, just for clarity, I'm putting Colossal Retaliators into utility, and I don't want to make a separate category for them because, again, you're primarily playing them for a utility role, not necessarily always from a support role, like in the case of Sinestro at Colossal Retaliator at 25 points. Like, he's just that good. All right, so let's start breaking it down. In the support class, there are some figures I think that stand out, like, automatically. Now, some of them I think most people sort of overlook, but I have to say, like, their utility is there. Let's start off with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Return. Let's look at Splinter. Now, Splinter gives you the ability to potentially up your attack by 1 and also get in power. And he's able to up your attack by 1 as a global effect. And it's something that I feel it's something you need to look at with other characters that operate in that +1 attack, or I do blankety blank bonuses. I think you have to look at Splinter in that same mindset. So you definitely have to go to him. Next up along that list is Irma from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Heroes in a Half Shell. Coming in at 25 points, she's standard size. She gives you perplex and doesn't block friendly characters' line of fire. So she can stand in front of friendly characters and pretty much be this robotic shield. And I think that's something that gives her a distinct advantage in the current meta. Definitely when you're looking at, I feel personally there's going to be more of a choke point meta because of several objects that are out there. And so, yeah, just several objects that are out there. It's going to be more of a choke point meta. But so Irma being able to be a physical block for your team without being an obstruction is a great positive. And there's no way to, over or understate it. Now, with that being said, she's not super deep, but having sidestep as well gives her additional mobility that really other characters really don't have when it comes to support. Definitely your support perplex. All right, let's keep on going down here. And where'd he go? Our next character that we're going to look at is, I'm going to pair Jane Foster and Eric Masterson together, but I'm also going to give an addendum that both of these characters fall into the support class and then also potentially can go into the attacker class. Now, I want to make it clear when I say potentially. It's not guaranteed that they're going to go into the attacker class. But for the utility that you're getting out of them for a majority of the game, to what they can become, the fact that those characters can be healed off of the click that they come in on, there's a lot of added value for having Jane Foster's and Eric Masterson's on your team. Now, I would also sort of retort when it comes to Eric Masterson, like you just can't come in there and be like, yeah, Eric Masterson, he's going to solve all of my problems. He really isn't. I'm just going to be honest about it. Eric Masterson isn't going to solve all your problems, but he is going to assist in transitioning the game from being maybe a complete loss into something that's a little bit more palatable, a little bit more favorable to look at. Now, I personally like the characters that can, AE and morph and all other jank. So I feel like they always have a place in my personal play style because I feel like you're getting an extreme amount of value out of them. But I know that's not everybody's position. I know that there's folks that look at those things and just say, point liability and whatnot, and that's fair as well. They easily can turn into just pure point liability. But I want us to start expanding some of our thought process, definitely when it comes to the support character. Next up is Shifting Focus Black Panther. Again, one of those characters that goes from from support into that attacker. And I know some people will look at the changes to Avengers like I had, saying gosh, this just sucks. WizKids just nerfed, a team ability that was, classically that's been horrible, but just now is starting to get better. And I get it. I'm right there with you. But we're also just looking. We're looking at a transformation of the game, and this is sort of the third step in that process. So I know I lost a cool ally in my super strong Black Panther, throwback to the past worthy, but at the same time we're also seeing some new developments in the game. So I gotta be a little bit more happy on that. All right, next up is a questionable character, Karen Page. You could say that she is a support, and you can push her into perplex, and but she also has a global effect to increase attack values. I don't mind Karen Page. The problem is how do you keep Karen Page alive, considering that she has to be within 3 squares of an opposing character. Now, if that opposing character is little to no threat, then yeah, just have her tie up, a mobloid or something, and you're great. Your team has this huge bonus. But other than that, I don't think that she's active enough to be of much use, unfortunately. But she is somebody that you do have to think about. Let's just sort of keep going down. I want to give honorable mention to WizKid, because WizKid can super power up your force at the cost of your prime slot. And there's not a lot of forces that I feel that can properly utilize him, even though he's not bad. Unfortunately, him flying is probably his biggest weakness, but the Frogmare hammer, I think, is going to be the great equalizer, so to speak, when it comes to getting him around. I think that's going to be the new utility call. It's going to be the utility call for using WizKid. Domino, 25-point prop, of course. Captain Stacy, as you can see, he's also, again, a prime, but he's a little bit more useful. I would say this, he's about the same utility as WizKid for me. Now, I would also want to point out Hydra Recruit. Now, I personally feel that Hydra Recruit, for the points, for everything that it does, is probably one of the most undervalued, overlooked utility pieces in the game right now. I know, Henry came out around at the same time. People weren't really looking at Hydra Recruit because, reasons beyond my knowledge. The people didn't like how it felt. I guess they didn't want to have Nazis on their team. I get it. But when we look at Hydra Recruit, we could clearly see a bunch of things. Number one, low point cost. Number two, sidestep, so you can reposition your enhancement and your Hydra TA. Willpower, so if you actually have to move, you can move multiple turns in a row. And enhancement, which helps your ranged attackers. If push comes to shove, you have a range value of 4. 1 damage, unfortunately, so you're only going after soft targets. It's not bad. It's actually pretty good. And so when we look at, of course the set's going to be retiring soon. Of course, we're looking at a situation in which, unfortunately, I think this is a character that never really got a chance to shine. But I think that going forward into creating this new meta, I think that the Hydra Recruit has a distinct place. And if we fail to recognize that, then, we're overlooking huge opportunities. All right, continuing on the support trip, I'm going to bring up Fast Forces Penguin. Now, this character, I think currently right now is your answer to stat mods for characters that start with objects. So if you can't play an entity with a character that starts with an object, and that's really, really important to remember. Definitely going into competitive games, that you can't stack an object and an entity. But here's sort of the cool thing. When you look at getting that stat bump, this Penguin gives you a good stat bump for attack and range. And so, with that being said, you're paying 25 points for a guaranteed +1 attack. You don't have to worry about if ever did your stats line up with your entity or whatnot. You don't have to worry about that jank, which we can be a bit more happy about. So when all's said and done, you can sort of look back and you can see this figure, and realized like it's not the most survivable figure. It's slightly inflated because of the Batman enemy team ability. I truthfully feel like if that team ability was not there, then that piece would be a lot cheaper. But I think in particular, it's pointed that way so that you couldn't put more elements on there than that already were there. Because truth, in my mind, this is, without the TA, this is easily a 20-point piece or even a 15-point piece. And yeah, I'll be better. I'll just say a 20-point piece. So, yeah, that extra 5 points is an ID card right now. So let's not front. Next up is Amanda Waller. I think that Amanda Waller works out really great. In particular, that she's giving you leadership. She's giving you Suicide Squad. You can still copy Suicide Squad. She's stealth, so she can protect herself. So there's a lot of great things that are there. She's taking tokens off of characters that are Politician and Suicide Squad. So if you like Deadshot, she can start taking tokens off of Deadshot. All that other good jazz. And so let's wrap this up with a figure that I feel that also has been overlooked for high-level play is Poison Ivy from the World's Finest Fast Forces. Barrier, Stealth, Smoke Cloud, and Shape Change. So you have the ability to lace the field with whatever you really need. On top of that, you have Mind Control. When Poison Ivy is adjacent to a friendly character with a printed team symbol, modify her defense value by +1. So she has a ton of utility built in, caked in even, and it's just sprouting all sorts of goodness. Yes, I couldn't resist the puns. I couldn't. With the new barrier changes, she's great. With new mind control changes, she's even better. Of course, your opponent has to be a lot closer for her to mind control, but that's really, not that big of a deal. You're not primarily mind controlling with her. But for 25 points to have stealth, to have smoke cloud, to have barrier, to have mind control, to have the potential to get +1 defense, and shape change, that's a lot. That's a lot in a very cheap package for support. So definitely look out for her. Are her keywords the best? No. She has Scientist in Arkham Asylum. But they are worth keeping in mind. Now, let's look at utility. So I'm going to unpack utility just a bit more. And my main goal in looking at utility figures are a couple of things. Do they do something that are not standard powers or team abilities? Do they do something that's not standard powers or team abilities? Okay. The next thing I'm looking at is, do they fill a hole that a type of team would have? Do they fill a hole a type of team would have? Okay. So, for example, a POG team relying on the Captain America con exclusive, the Earth X Captain America. It's something that the team can come back and utilize, but it's also something that specifically that team needs a lot of, getting just a ton of actions out or removing a ton of tokens. So there we go. All right, so let's begin. And I'm going to start off with a character that we really probably should start with because it's a new character that no one's really talking about, and that's Dr. Frankenstein. He comes in at 30 points, and he is 3 clicks. He has sidestep, he has willpower, and this is from the Undead set, which I really wish they just called RIP. That would have been way better. He has a trait that says it's alive. He has support as a free action, but only the target characters with the monster keyword. When Dr. Frankenstein uses it, increase the D6 roll by +1. So it just allows him to potentially to heal for 3 a little bit better. Mad Scientist, perplex, but only to target characters with the monster keyword. If the target is named Frankenstein's monster, Dr. Frankenstein can modify combat values by +2. So actually, I apologize. I should have put this into the support function. I thought he did something else. I'm thinking probably of the death. I was thinking of death or something like that, but I apologize. That he definitely should be in the support area. And there's a lot of monsters right now, a la Goblin King, that could really use Dr. Frankenstein. Oh man, my flub. There we go. So let's go ahead and let's start with a nice piece here. Mauser. Now I know some folks will say, like, Mauser, how is Mauser a utility piece? Well, he has a trait which says they chew through buildings. Give Mauser a power action to destroy an adjacent wall or a square of blocking terrain. Now, no, they have sidestep, so you can just sort of sidestep them into position. But they're a nice little chisel without dedicating one of your main attackers to actually doing something. And that's a big deal. We also have Baxter Stockman. Most people are familiar with Baxter Stockman and all his other great shenanigans. But just for a reminder, you're mainly looking at his robotics genius trait. Special power. Give Baxter Stockman a free action to heal an adjacent friendly character with the robotics keyword +1. If it can't be healed, modify the speed and attack value by +1. Dang it, I keep forgetting he's a utility too. He's a support too. So many flubs. So many flubs. Alright, so let me go to characters that I know for sure are utility. Let's go to Avengers Defenders War, and we have several right in a bunch, in a big bunch. All right, so first off is Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones has the ability to use. They always leave clues. Opposing characters within 6 squares can't use stealth. Now, this is a big deal because if your team doesn't have a Superman TA, or anything with improved targeting or Avengers Initiative or any of that stuff, you're at a great disadvantage. I wouldn't say excessively massive, but you're at a pretty big disadvantage. So, being aware of that disadvantage allows you to pack a very reasonable 15-point option. Yes, that did eat away 3 of your ID cards. That could possibly blast away your stealth problem. I get that. But for the matter of consistency, Jessica Jones is really good. You also look at her Marvel Knights trait, which allows her to be a wild card, or have her attack value not be lower than 10. With a bunch of printed 9s on her dial, not being lower than 10, and being a wild card, both of those are really, really good. All right. Next up is Foggy Nelson. Foggy Nelson has Trust Me, I'm a Lawyer, which pretty much gives you outwit protection. There's not a standard character in the game that gives you that. So that's something that you have to look at very carefully. Like I said, Jessica Jones, Foggy Nelson, these 2 characters are probably your biggest utility pieces in the game right now, in terms of, I would not just say cost effectiveness, but just usefulness. I know some folks would argue on the usefulness element because, of course, not every team needs them. But if your team does need them, this is by far these 2 characters are by far some of the best characters that you can have. I'm going to bring up Betty Brant. Now, Betty Brant, you could just argue is, yes, she is a support piece because of her perplex and defend support. That is there. But she also has the special power. I'll prove my husband was not the hobgoblin if I have to retrieve every glider. It says opposing characters with wing symbol modify their speed values by -1. If that character is named hobgoblin, instead modify all the characters' combat values by -1. So you're able to start messing with your opponent's force, and that's a very important thing. And with the abundance of flyers, Betty Brant with Elijah Snow pretty much guarantees that your opponent is going to have a, not necessarily a horrible day, but a worse day on the battlefield. So I really think that she's someone to look at. Unfortunately, her little ability does not stack. I really wish it did. 3 of her on a force for as low as she is could really slow down a game and create a lot of problems. So just some thoughts that are just coming out of my mind here. Next up, from my wonderful magical analysis, is the Cap cycle, the Captain America cycle. Now, I know for most people, you're going to be like, what? The Cap cycle? Yes, Cap cycle. And here's why. First off, you can play with any sort of Captain America. It doesn't have any passengers. But by putting any character in with decent melee stats right now, you can allow to give them charge. And then you also have the ram ability. But the main thing is that you're able to grant the character charge. Then you also have the trait Jump It. Captain America motorcycle, you can use improved movement, ignores elevation terrain. So if a character can't fly or anything like that, or, then this allows them to transition elevation. If Captain America's motorcycle moves and crosses at least one edge of elevation terrain adjacent to the opposing characters, modify their defense values by -1 this turn. So that's pretty great, because even if he misses his attack, your opponent for the rest of the turn, that character has a -1 defense. So I really, really like this. I don't have one, but I do like it. All right. Next up is where do they go? And I'll just, for a brief comment, I know I'm gonna come back to the Colossal Retaliators. I just wanted to get to the characters that do something a little bit different. Here we go. Thanagarian. Yeah, Invasion from the Skies. Give Thanagarian a move action with a lock speed value of 3. If you do, after action resolve, a carry character may be given a non-free action, but only if it's a close action. So you can allow a character to do an attack, and you could just carry them into position. And with the way things are worded now, you pretty much allow a character to use blades, so that's pretty cool. I like that. Now, this, again, is another way of giving a character charge, but you can just sort of go back and forth in between characters and taxi them around. So that is something that I actually feel is really, really good. There is those world needs to know from the reporters, and my problem with them is that they go off at the beginning of your turn. And there isn't really a reliable way of guaranteeing that they're going to stay alive for those abilities to go off. So that's my only problem with them. But they are a unique control in the game that can pay off huge dividends in the long run. All right. Next up is Alfred Pennyworth from the Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice set. And mainly for his trait. Now, for a utility piece for enhancement in Batman TA, you're paying way too much, because you can get Diggle for cheaper. And you get a couple other characters I feel that just provide what he does way better for way better cost. But he has a trait. He's not your enemy, Bruce. Once per game, you may give Alfred Pennyworth a power action. If you do, choose a friendly character and an opposing character, both within line of fire. Until your next turn, the chosen characters can't target each other. So this gives you a brief reprieve if you need to, guarantee your Jakeem Thunder is going to, live another turn. But other than that, I really wouldn't depend on it more than that. It's a good, hard tempo control. And I think that's just been just overlooked, not underlooked, overlooked, and underappreciated. There we go. So let's talk about the Colossal Retaliators, and I'm going to break the Colossal Retaliators up slightly into two groups, which I just mainly look at as like raw damage, and then the other class is you're primarily bringing this for a control. When they hit, they do a cool control element. So the first figure that we're going to look at, as soon as I can find him, is Dormammu. But unfortunately... No, take that back. Dormammu was 35, I think. I think Dormammu was 35, and that's why I can't find him. In the back of my head, I was like, Dormammu's under 30? And it's like, nah, he's over 30. So let's start. Let's start with Carnage. Carnage is your force multiplier and can be your like small attacker, but you're primarily dropping Carnage for the Carnage Pause for the Planet of Symbiotes. That is clearly your number one reason for having Carnage. You don't really want him for much more than that, because his Colossal Retaliation just allows him to spout out more Planets of Symbiotes. So when you realize that, if you want to make sure you have him with something that's going to benefit from having all those pogs out, like General Lane or something like that. Next up is Mangog. Now, Mangog is definitely in that stupid levels of damage he shouldn't exist type category, but he does exist, and he does stupid levels of damage, so that's something that you realistically have to deal with. If you fail to deal with that reality, you're in trouble. That's just the best way of putting it. You're in trouble. I would argue, truthfully, that between Carnage and Mangog right now, you're better off with Carnage. It's not that Mangog isn't bad, because his damage is stupid, like 7 damage. But the problem with Mangog, I feel, is in the current game, I don't think that he offers enough as a retaliator up front. You have to build a certain type of team for Mangog as a retaliator at the point value. And I think one of those main teams is a hyper-mobile team. And there's enough elements right now in the game that are going to be consistently played to threaten hypermobile teams. And with the change to Earthbound, your pick-a-power characters, or your characters that would be giant but aren't, are now in this weird state where they can't just be hauled around. They have to walk or be TK'd. So we're seeing this really weird shift where you can have a hyper carry, but not all hyper carries are guaranteed to be good, versus how it was previously, where there was no threat to any of the hyper carries. TK was also good, but TK got nerfed. So your best carry option can easily be negated if you're not properly packing 3 to 4 other options that guarantee that you're able to create an object out your butt. Just poop an object out for you to turn into a poo-smelling, charged up token, and that's the issue. So I digress. But anyway, sort of going back is because Mangog really does rely on, I rush you, force you to attack me close to your starting area, and then I'm going to Colossal Retaliate you near your starting area, then sidestep back into your starting area and promote. When you look at that tactic, it's obvious. There's no surprises when you see Mangog across the field. But at the same time, I really just look at it as you're not guaranteed to get that tactic off, because there are enough things in the game right now that hinder that, and there's enough a reason there's enough of a reason to not pack certain elements because there's I'm sort of breaking up because in particular it's there's a bunch of complex elements into it. So I'm just going to take a little brief break from the Colossal Retaliation commentary and just sort of unpack it. Okay. The fact that Mr. Nobody is on the come up again, and I said at the moment that Overdrive came out, like Mr. Nobody needs to be looked at, but nobody listen to Dark Logos. Nobody listen to Dark Logos, you know. But with the weapons out, Mr. Nobody has a higher, I would say, a higher chance of appearing in a competitive game, more so now than ever before. Okay, definitely in this next month and a half. So going into October, you have a higher chance of seeing Mr. Nobody than you did for the last year and a half. Okay, so functionally a Mr. Nobody team can screw over a Overdrive team unless they have a Mr. Nobody or they're able to create objects. Which then comes back to that Overdrive cannot turn special objects into charged up. So if you're going to face like a Mr. Nobody mirror match, each side can place their opponent's objects, but if you as a controlling player, are like, hey, screw anybody that's playing a charged up, I'm not going to play a standard object, your opponent can't consume a special object and turn it into a charged up. So because of that, you can functionally say, so what, you place my objects, here's a dueling sword, and here's a mace for you, there's 5 points, I have your Mjolnir. And I think a lot of people will get butthurt after a while from that. And so, if you just don't play a standard object, now your opponent has, your Mjolnir plus, your 2 heavies and a light, or your 2 heavies or whatever. Okay. And they just got dueling swords and the mace. So they got like 6 points off of you, or 5. I forgot which one it is. Okay. So there's that. And then you can say, well, Dark Logos then. I will play like Renee Tilly, but Renee Tilly can't carry flyers. You look at all your Green Lanterns that came out from What If. They can't carry flyers. As good as they are, they can't carry flyers. So what then? Well, now you're looking at teams that primarily focus around boot-based figures. Well, those boot-based figures, you're really, really limiting, what types of teams you can play. Now, I won't argue with the strength of Nick Fury. I won't argue, with the utility of having, what's his name? And of course, the moment I started thinking about him, I see his face in my head, but I can't think of his name. Well, whatever. There are tons of figures that you can just think of as like, oh, okay, I'll play that. But then you start looking at what you're not playing. Oh, sorry, Common Hulk. Why couldn't I think of Hulk? Oh, wow, that's bad. You can easily say like, hey, that's Starter Hulk. Sorry, Starter Hulk. Gotta be specific. You can easily say all right, I'll just play those figures. Like, great, now you can't play Jakeem. All right, so then you have the other issue is Elijah Snow. Elijah Snow comes back and says to Overdrive, screw you. But then the Flyers are like, but I'm still good. And then you have Betty Brant who says -1 movement plus the penalty for carrying each additional character. So you were only carrying 2, now you're -3 movement. You're not getting far. Like, even if your movement is 10, you're only carrying 7 and placing 1 up, so it's 8. You're getting close to old school TK. You're not clearing the map quickly. So even if you push with Betty Brant on the field, you're going to be a -3 movement. You're not going anywhere fast. And if you have a sub 10 movement, you're really not going anywhere fast. So there is an argument now, and it's a legit argument, that you can slow the game. As much as WizKids wanted to make the game faster by nerfing TK, which they shouldn't have done, but I understand why. And also creating these game elements that can nerf your taxis, which was supposed to be the reason why you were nerfing TK. You now are opening yourself up to an array of problems. Like, realistically, you're just opening yourself up to an array of problems. So, so fundamentally, you can come back and say, well, hey, Dark Logos, I have a Colossal, and my Colossal will carry. Well, does your Colossal fly? They're still going to be affected by Betty Brant. Is your Colossal, foot symbol? They're still going to be affected by Elijah Snow. It's pure and simple. So, like I said, in the back of my head, I have this huge debate going on about how you're getting characters downfield, and then how's that change into tempo, how's that change into several other things. So when I'm bringing it all the way back to Mangog, when initially we had this Mangog Colossal Retaliator, oh my gosh, this is stupid love, it was based around the concept of Overdrive by turn 2 is creating situations where your opponent is sort of boned. I mean, yeah, your opponent is boned. You're in their face. They're looking down the barrel of, Samantha Wilson, Captain America, and whoever else is throwing giblets. And, and your opponent knows if they land any attack that, Mangog is coming in with his evil, Manchurian candidate face and just ruining things. He looks like a reject concept art for the Mandarin. Okay? So, boom. He Colossals down, does all his jank. So, there's a problem. If you can't make that initial push, and make that initial push fast, because your opponent says, for, 2 reasonably useful figures, I just did this to you. Not like, oh, I have this over-saturated, going one-way figure. No, for rather cheap, I just limited and screwed your mobility. Have a good day, governor. And then they can just dig in. So there is a case for, if you want to say it like Fortress teams, there's a case for Fortress teams to come back. Because they can just be like, yeah, whatever, we're going to be here, and we set up, far enough away so that if you try to Colossal Retaliate, we are going to break your Mangog. Yeah. So anyway, let's keep going, because I'm gonna stay. I can stay on Mangog for a while. I'm gonna go down to the new entries. And I'm going to talk about real briefly for Ameridroid, and then I'm going to talk about real briefly for Wonder Woman. Ameridroid is the hero we need. Not the hero we asked for, but the hero we need. Why is that? Number one, Ameridroid has Indom, which doesn't seem like a lot, but with the abundance of Colossal Retaliators out there, Indom is important. Having a 6 range and then being able to potentially punch another Colossal Retaliator with Colossal Retaliation is great. Or being able to move up, some squares, carrying a character, and then, Colossal Retaliating and then punching another Colossal in the face. That's great too. The other thing about Ameridroid that I really like is that his Colossal Retaliation effect goes off even if he misses. So you just alley-oop people wherever you want. Oh, shoot, I Colossal Retaliate. Alley-oop you into the dead space so you fall off and take a guaranteed 1. Boom, Colossal Retaliate. Alley-oop. All right, Jakeem, single target pulse wave. Alley-oop, all right, charge flurry. Alley-oop, Blaze Claws Fangs flurry. Woot. He is the support character machine. And it's silly. It's silly. His attack isn't that good, but his effect is guaranteed. And since his effect is guaranteed, you really just want to look at him. And the funny thing is that, let's just look at this. After action resolve, the chosen character in any square within 6 squares in line of fire. Oh gosh. Yeah, sorry. After action resolve, place the chosen character in any square within 6 squares in line of fire of a Maridroid. So pretty much a Maridroid can place Colossals. Like, it's silly. Like, he alley-oops people. He freaking back body slams people. I forgot, was it suplex? Just boom, suplex people. You know. So there you go. All right, so I really think that he is someone that, you know, we were like on fire for around Origins, and then we just sort of forgot about him. I don't hear him talked about, but yeah, definitely a Maridroid. Then we have the Skyscraper Wonder Woman, and I feel like the Skyscraper Wonder Woman is your cheaper version of Sinestro. I feel he's your cheaper version. She's your cheaper version of Sinestro. She's able to stop, you know, characters from moving and attacking, and she does decent amount of damage. She has a decent range, which means that when you start combining her, you know, with other game effects, such as, you know, probably potentially the ability to outwit other characters, she has, you know, decent range. She's not a slouch. So I look at her in a Maridroid as the new gatekeepers of the Colossal Retaliators. They're the entryway into, is this a good Colossal Retaliator? I know you could say, like, but they're better Colossal Retaliators. It's like, yes, there are better Colossal Retaliators. And that's sort of my point, is that if you can't beat a Maridroid in utility, and you can't beat Wonder Woman in utility, then you need to just back off. So anyway, let's just keep going. And of course, there's the Atom, and you know, if you haven't been thinking about the Atom for the last almost 2 years, then that's on you. And then, of course, I really am sad to say that Brimstone is faded out of the meta. He's not any good anymore. But you do need to be mindful of that. Now let's look at just pure attackers. And there's a lot better attackers than I care to admit in the game right now, and that's sub 30. And that's a big, big positive for the game. Again, you can't win the game with them, but they are there, and they do a lot. Now, my first one that I want to bring up is because it's silly. Vampire Baron. You start them on like what is this? 5 movement, poison, super senses, and shape change. You can start them there, or you can start them on the 10 move charge. But you get them into position, charge in, try to get your hit if you can. If not, that's fine. But you also, on your 10 move, you also have the tiny symbol, so you can be carried. So you could, get in position, boom. Then you can free action, turn into the poison shape change. Do that. And then on the following turn, go to 10 attack, 2 damage, stealth. This thing is actually pretty much really good for just being annoying and tying up, and then also potentially getting some damage in. You can go through your first TMNT foot soldiers. Considering that they can potentially come back, they are really, really good for what they do. Then, of course, there's the Serpent Pogs, but I really need to highlight in order which ones are the best. Serpent Moon Knight is the best Serpent Pog. And everybody looked at me like I was stupid. I know. You're like, what? Yes, Serpent Moon Knight is the best Pog, followed up by Serpent Spider-Man, then Serpent Punisher, then Serpent Daredevil. Now, why is that? People forget the freaking traits on these suckers. Okay, you have Trade Hit, Blaze Claw's Fangs, and Improved Movement ignores hindering terrain. Now you have Precision Strike with Serpent Moon Knight, so now you get past, you lower Super Senses by 1. So you charge Blaze Claw's Fangs, guaranteed to do 1 damage. Yeah, charge Blaze Claw's Fangs. We forgot about how good that was. For 15 points with an 11 attack. Yeah, I'll take that. Versus Hyper Serpent Spidey, who's only doing 2 damage, and you can't use Blaze Claw's Fangs. So, there you go. That's why. But Hyper Spidey can get into position. Moon Knight can get into position. Serpent Punisher has a hard time getting into position and requires an open map for him to do anything. That's bad because we don't have a ton of open maps to use. There are some that are open-ish, but we really don't have a lot of open maps to use. Serpent Daredevil just sucks. He has sidestep, in-cap, crap range, combat reflexes. He has the same movement as Spider-Man, and he has close combat expert. This is complete crap. It's worse. I'm glad that he's not his own Pog. So, but yeah, just look at him. I really think Serpent Moon Knight is the best. Then Rock Troll, 4 clicks deep, surprisingly deep for his points. 5 clicks deep, and 11 attack, 3 damage. Just overall really good. Already talked about the potential of Jane Foster and Eric Masterson. We keep going down. There is a case for Hawkeye from Avengers Defenders War, Common Hawkeye, if you want to make that case. I'm really just throwing that out there as an idea, not something that you necessarily always want to go to. But if you're looking for a cheap sidestep, decent range, I definitely like them. Or like him, not them, like him. Going down to the DC, when you look at the Super Apes, Ape Flash is great. He's money. He's straight money. You definitely want to check him out. Hypersonic speed, no Indom though. That's the only problem. But the traded super strength makes up for it, and you can do close attacks or you can throw the object, and both are actually pretty valid. Now, when we look at Joker's Wild, I have to say there are 2 characters that stand out for me for really, really cheap damage. Of course, there is the Atom coming at 25 points. We are also used to seeing him as a Colossal Retaliator and all that jazz. But then, not so much looked at character is Our Man. He has a simpler time trait, but also you have access to you also have access to super strength. So going out there, grabbing an object and, ganking people becomes a lot more just viable. So I really think that he's a character that you can use. Again, coming in at 5 clicks deep, most people aren't going to expect him to be that deep. And he has regen, so if he gets on his click 5, your opponent is just going to be pissed off because they just spent their last attack, thinking they're going to KO Our Man, and it didn't work, and now he gets to regen. So, of course, there's always like, haha, Joker, but I really don't like counting him because I feel like that's sort of cheating. And Demon isn't bad per se. It's just he's not great. He's just not great. The numbers, the damage values are not bad, but it's just not great. Now let me go back and I'm going to talk about the objects real briefly because I know some people were like, "How dare you speak, ill of our new idols of, in particular Jarborn." And I want to make some things clear. First off, I didn't realize how bad it was until I started really playing with them the last 2 weeks. Is your tempo is slow. Like, unknowingly, WizKids introduced a bunch of game elements. A bunch of game elements that just slow the dang game down. And once you slow the dang game down, that leaves certain openings. And certain things that weren't really possible in the last year and a half are now possible again. And I don't think WizKids understood what they did. All right, so now I know some of you are like, what? Okay, so let's just break it down. Turn 1, if you are playing a newer player, what they're going to do is they're going to move their guy up to their object. Pick up the object if they have super strength. But if they don't, they're going to, if it's a light, anybody will come pick up the object or they'll just go stand on it. Okay, cool. They just did that. All right. Next, what's going to end up happening is your opponent is going to move up and all other stuff. Sorry, the opponent's going to move up. Then the newer player is going to then take another action to equip the object. So that character is tokened. All right. Mainly, it's usually their main attacker. Then the opponent moves up or does whatever they do again. Then on turn 3, the character that picked up the object is going to clear. The opponent does whatever else they did. By that time, they're definitely engaged. And then turn 4, the character that had picked up the object is now active. Okay, now that's a newer player. Okay, so you see, there's 4 turns where it takes 4 turns before you actually do something. Most characters aren't going to last that long. Then on top of that, if your opponent lets you just do all that without being punished from an attack, they're building something up. So you've already lost in momentum. Okay, so then you're going to say, like Will Dark Logos, hey man, I'm not a noob. What do I do? Well, okay, let's just say you're not a noob. You have TK because you're going to need it. You're going to either TK the object back or you're going to TK the character to the object. Then you're going to equip turn 1. Turn 2, your opponent is somewhere near midfield and you're going to decide if you're going to deploy or not. Or if you're going to try to deploy out turn 1, you can do that as well. Hopefully, if you're able to deploy out turn 2, you don't have to take an additional action with your character who picked up the object, so you're able to clear and then get to attacking on turn 3. Here's the problem. The standard meta before objects was a hard engage on turn 2. So, from a pacing perspective, your character that just picked up an object to equip it, now, if they're facing a early rush down, are going to be double token into the second wave of the attack phase. So just to break that down, again, you're on turn 2. They have 1 action token. You go in to attack. Now you have 2 tokens into turn 3. And your opponent, more than likely, doesn't have second action tokens on the majority of their attackers, plus or minus any damage that was done, and then boom, you have an engage on turn 3, which is the second wave of the attack, and now your big attacker who has this magical weapon that's going to save the day is going to have to clear, unless they are a colossal or they have what was it? It's not Minions of Doom. Masters of Evil. Unless they have Masters of Evil. So, well, what do you do? And the truth of the matter is what you do is play characters that auto-equip objects. That's pretty much what you do. Because when we start looking at the pacing, and we're looking at everything else that's going on from a practical standpoint, if I'm seeing this at the lower levels, I know I'm also going to start seeing some of this at the higher levels, is that as magical as these weapons are, realistically there are enough things in the game right now that hinders your uses of them, or better yet, creates a situation where your newfound advantages are going to give you just huge tempo disadvantages. So you have an early game deficit that you have to make up in the mid game to overcome and win in the end game. Now, I know some folks will say, like, that's a lot of assumptions. I'm like, it's really not. And it only compounds the more special objects you use. You have 3 special objects. Do you have 3 TKs? Okay, you're going to, let's just say you have a leadership, you're going to get a +1 action and a 300-point game. So unless you have a bunch of Jean Greys that are free TKing out all these objects, you're not going to have enough actions in your first turn to equip all your objects. So playing 3 special objects is by far the worst thing that you can do. By far the worst thing you can do. I'll repeat it one more time. By far the worst thing you can do. Having 1 special object is the most optimal if you need to, but in all honesty, having it on your best character or your setup character may be more of a problem than we actually thought. Now, if you're playing against somebody else that's playing this, wait, let me put my armor back on sort of jank, then yeah, you're fine. Your pacing is fine. But if you play somebody that's like, well, I'm just going to huff it downfield and come after you, bro, then you're going to have a bit of a problem from a pacing perspective. Okay, now let's say you have 2 objects. Now again, you need that magical Jean Grey free TK or the free move that doesn't, put a token on you or something like that so that you can equip that object. Otherwise, you're not equipping that second object on average until turn 2. Okay? Now, if we really start breaking it down from that stage, that the only way that you can functionally equip multiple characters in the same turn is in a 400 game or higher, which isn't standard WizKids play. Okay? So in a 400 game or higher, yeah, you could have 2 objects, 2 special objects, and utilize them quite efficiently, okay? But the problem comes in is this. You're still yielding to your opponent way too much advantage in terms of board positioning, in terms of just advancement, and even having a place to sort of retract to. You've just given so much to your opponent. Not only that, you could say, well, Dark Logos, I have a character who'll just pick up this light and then we'll go, hidey-ho into the future. Well, characters that have picked up an object cannot be carried. Point blank, period. Do you have a flyer that picked up an object? It can't pick up characters. Do you have a character that has picked up an object? It can't be carried. It doesn't matter if it's a vehicle or a flyer. That's just the facts. Okay, so you until that item is equipped, you're screwed. Okay, so let's look at it. If we're going to risk tempo, what objects allow us to risk tempo to make it worth it? Blood Axe, really useful for risking tempo. Okay, Knob Mace. Having faced it recently, it's a lot better in practice than I thought it would be. Seeing it on a person's team, it's pretty good. Frognir, again, if you're equipping this, you're mainly doing it so you can be carried. So again, like from a tempo perspective, you're really not hurt from Frognir. Okay, so it's beneficial to use it. Frey, again, you're putting this on like a secondary character, and I would even argue that if you're at that stage of putting it on secondary character and not a primary character, you really don't need Frey. But if you're trying to put it on a primary character, I would say your damage value shouldn't exceed 3. Anything above 3, no, don't even waste your time. Okay, Mirror of Masolja, again, you're putting this on because you need to survive. You're not putting this on to be aggressive. So of course, this is an object that's fine to equip or look at. Dueling Swords, questionable, because you're putting it on a character that is hunting other characters down. Enchanted Ball and Chain, as strong as it is, you're creating a tempo disadvantage with yourself. So you need to be able to get tokens off that additional character. And I know someone's going to argue in the comments like, hey, Dark Logos, leadership, blah, 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 blah. I can pull this rainbow magic off. That's fine. I understand that. But that's a specific piece, and you're not always going to play that specific piece every time that you're going to play these objects. So I'm just speaking at baseline generalities here. All right, so then we start looking at Molnir. All right, you're not playing Molnir on your secondary attacker. You're not playing Molnir on your third string attacker. You're not playing Molnir on your 30-point character. You're playing Molnir on your main attacker. So if you don't have a leadership that can take tokens off of your main attacker, or they can't just like do an action for free or some jank like that, then yes, Molnir will slow down your damage. Slow down your tempo. You have to be able to figure out a way to ramp up your tempo after you've equipped Molnir. And if you can't, you functionally have given your opponent the chance to get a drop on you. And then you have to ask yourself the following question: can I make a comeback mid-dial? And if the answer is no, then Molnir is not a good object. I know I'm speaking blasphemy, right now, but this is just after playing that I'm noticing these things. So again, you can take it with a grain of salt. You can say, like, Dark Logos, you on that stuff again. That's fine. All right, next up is Thunderstrike. It's really good. I like him with the Jakeem Thunder, tech. But again, at the same time, if you're putting it on your main force guy, you have to be able to convert immediately with your next attack and make sure it goes off. Casket of Ancient Winters, you're more likely putting on a character that's a bit more passive. Jarnburn, the reason why it sucks, and I know somebody wrote in a comment, why does Jarnburn suck? You didn't tell us. And the reason why Jarnburn sucks, in all honesty, is that I'm paying for an object that is only going to convert me one more damage. If I play Enchanted Crowbar, it's going to, on average, give me 2 or more damage. So when we start looking at the cost, that straight up is better for the Enchanted Crowbar. They're both 10 points. Okay? If I look at Molnir, I'm getting +1 attack and +1 damage. Okay? And that's a constant. When I look at Enchanted Crowbar, it's a constant. Oh, you have damage reduction? You don't have damage reduction. You don't have anything worth a darn. You can't roll out of this. I'm about to exploit your face. That's what's about to happen. And I'm taking away your best stuff and giving you crap so my team can come back and whoop up on you. Okay? So again, look at Jarnburn. And you'll see, yeah, that's crap. I know crit hit sounds super wonderful, and I know, it can't be evaded now. It's crit hit, blah, 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 blah. But real talk, just real talk about this. You're only giving out 1 more damage. Just because you get a crit hit does not guarantee that you do knockback. I want to make that very clear. Just because you crit hit does not guarantee that you do knockback. So when you keep that in your mind, you're not like, oh, I hit him, crit hit, plus knock you into the wall, so for an additional 1 more damage. No. When it comes to that, Thunderstrike is way more effective for guaranteeing that your opponent gets knocked back. Definitely put Thunderstrike on a Pulse Wave character. You put Thunderstrike on a Pulse Wave character on an indoor map, you're guaranteed to almost automatically convert an additional damage plus heal. For, again, the same points as Jarnburn. So you start to see why Jarnburn is trash. And then I'm not trying to be like, I'm going to come after you commenters. I'm not. But I really want to, make this, a clear cut why this object is horrible. Okay? It's just like the Nier. Okay? I'm paying 10 points for a one-time use object. Yeah, I'm +3 stats. But it's a one-time use object. Okay? Dragon Fang. This is great because it allows me to hedge my bets and potentially, have a way higher damage output than normally expected. Okay? So that's there. Mace, for its super low points, allowing me to have knockback control is great. Hammer, hey, I'm paying 3 points. I can give an action token if I have a 10 through 12. So it's not bad. It's situational, maybe in cap. But I'm paying 3 points for it. Healing Casket gives me support, so I don't have to, pay for a medic if I don't want to. I can put it on another support character, and then they can heal. Oh, well, I roll one, whatever, cool. I got that heal off. That's it. We're done. All right, cool. Healing Casket, I lost that. It is 10 points, but at the same time, if I'm able to get 1 or 2 heals off in a game, actually 2 or 3 heals off in a game, I functionally have paid for the Healing Casket. And then it drops, and I want to make that clear. It's not destroyed, it drops. Oh, never mind, take that back. You KO this object. You KO the object. Man, so it's destroyed. My bad. I've just been looking at so many that drop. Alright, so the Spear gives me Giant Reach 2, which isn't bad, but I'm only paying 5 points. Since when this character is given an object of action, it may use the Spear as a held object. So you get a heavy. So there's some advantages, to playing most of these objects. Even with the axe, the axe is 3 points, and a 10 through 11 is a crit hit. Now, for 3 points and getting a potential +1 damage is great. Now, I want to make it again sort of clear. When you compare Jarnborn versus the axe is more cost effective because, again, it's a 1 in 4 chance. A 1 in 4 chance versus a 1 in 3 chance. But you're only paying 3 points versus 10 points. Not only that, when you start comparing against Thunderstrike and Mjolnir, Enchanted Ball and Chain, Enchanted Crowbar, and Blood Axe, all of these other effects that come in at 10 points, and all these other mechanics that come in at 10 points, when they deal damage, they either give you sustain, a la heal you, get around other effects, a la can't use shape change, or you can't use impervious, okay? Or they're able to splash out their damage to a bunch of other characters, like the Enchanted Ball and Chain. Oh, I quake everybody for my printed damage of 5. Ooh, look at this. I quake everybody for 5. That's great. Oh, I'm a giant. So you back there, you take that quake too. So when you start looking at that, well, take that back, not giant. I have Giant Reach 2. For whatever reason. Now when you start comparing all those elements, then boom, you start to see like, yeah, these are consistent, quote unquote, effects. And you can say, well, Enchanted Ball and Chain, I'm not always guaranteed to hit, 2 or 3 people. So I'm not always guaranteed to have a damage output. Well, if you're charging single target quaking everybody, then yeah, you are getting a damage output increase. Because every time you use Quake, because this Ball and Chain grants you Quake. It grants you Quake. Every time that you use Quake, you also are generating knockback. So if the character can be knocked back, you're dealing your base damage plus an additional 1 if you're able to knock them into a wall and they don't have damage reduction. So, like again, when we're looking at consistency of damage output, almost everything beats Mjolnir, Jarnborn, either from price comparison or just straight up from consistency. So yeah, Jarnborn is like the worst object, followed by Gungnir. Like, it's just horrible. Like, why am I paying 10 points for an object I'm going to destroy? If I'm going to destroy the object, look at Staff. I paid 3 points for that. Okay, so I'd rather have that. So anyway, overall, I hope you all can see in this episode, like the several different concepts I'm trying to cover. I know it's a little bit long. You can go back and look at this episode and then try to pull out what you feel is useful. And anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man, watch out, the chips are coming. After that Equifax hack, the biochips are coming. Mark my words. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Let me know what you think about the the new rules. Also, let me know what you think about WizKids. Comment about their potential changes to scoring and their little article. I'm looking to, field your feedback on that. You can buy a shirt from the link below, and you can donate to the show at startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com. It is the crypt that holds the ancient thoughts, but if you throw money in the well, you might get a wish. All right, that's it. Thank you all for listening, and remember,